Welcome to the LinkedIn Famous Podcast, the show where we get real about what it takes to build a personal brand on LinkedIn that gets real business results. We're talking about driving revenue from a personal LinkedIn profile by sharing real and authentic stories and points of view. I'm Brad Zomick, your host and the founder of Spectrumer, a personal brand consultancy that helps founders and executives get LinkedIn famous. Join me for unfiltered conversations from the trenches of LinkedIn. We'll meet CEOs, go-to-market executives, subject matter experts, and company employees with blockbuster LinkedIn results. We'll unpack strategy and leave you with tactical advice to grow your personal brand and demand for your company's products and services. All right, LinkedIn hustlers, it's time to level up. Welcome, LinkedIn movers and makers. Today, I have a unique guest on the podcast. Typically, we're interviewing CEOs and go-to-market executives building companies with more than one employee, venture-funded companies and sometimes big agencies. Today, we have a one-man wrecking ball and the scalable systems guru that operates a seven-figure business all by himself, not even a virtual assistant. Let's welcome Ken Yarmosh, the sole operator and the lead mentor of the remote solopreneur. But let's first turn back the clock, learn a little bit about Ken's background. Ken started his career as a product manager, and the first 5 years of his career, he was in-house, rising up to director level, did some consulting on the side. Then he founded Savvy Apps, a mobile app design agency that made award-winning iOS, Android, and web apps for Fortune 500 companies. Big names like Toyota, Levi's, PBS, NFL Players Association, and Motley Fool. The company scaled to $5 million per year. And after 12 years, in 2020, he exited. He did pretty well for himself. During that time, he became great at much more than product management. He learned marketing, sales, and customer service. The common thread for his success was systems. As I mentioned, he's the scalable systems guru. After selling Savvy Apps, Ken wasn't ready to sell off into the sunset. He repositioned himself to help the former Kens of the world. He started the Remote Solopreneur, a community for solo consultants who want to grow their business without hiring. Just shy of 3 years later, the community has more than 200 members. The business also has a one-on-one mentoring component. There's masterminds, private mentorship from Ken. He's worked with some very heavy hitters on LinkedIn. Many might be familiar with some of those names: Lara Acosta, Matt Barker, Taz Bober, Alex Sheridan, Lachey Lewis, Nick Brokema, Danny Del Vecchio. Full disclosure, I'm a member of his community, but Ken fits the bill for LinkedIn Famous. He's got 30,000 followers, millions of impressions clocked in the last 3 years, and regularly gets hundreds of engagements on his posts. Most importantly, he's built his business on LinkedIn, and today he's going to peel back the veil and share some of those systems. Ken, welcome to the LinkedIn Famous Podcast.
Appreciate it, Brad. Thanks for having me out today, man. Appreciate that.
Anything else about your background that you want to double click to expand?
No, man, I appreciate it. I have to object almost to being called a guru because I've just been the yous of the world, right? Some of the folks that'll be listening to this, I've just been in the trenches building businesses in various shapes and capacities and forms. I've also been a person who helped build startups, build those products. So I actually saw it inside what it looked like to build for the founders while also having built and scaled my own professional services. Now, just excited to get into it here and appreciate being called LinkedIn Famous. That wasn't what I aspired to when I started doing what I'm doing today, but nonetheless, I am often called that and or a quote unquote creator. But really, it just comes down to sharing what I've done for dozens and dozens of years at this point.
They certainly know your stuff and excited to talk about some of that. Before we get into that, I'd like to ask you to tell us something about yourself that the audience couldn't learn about you from your LinkedIn profile or the content that you post on LinkedIn.
That is a fun place to start. My joke that I made for a long time was that I was scaling both my businesses and my home life at the same time. Maybe there were some just a good economies of scale, but I have 4 kids and I have 3 kids that are all just basically a year apart. And people say, do you understand how this works? I said, yes, I understand how it works. But I had 3 kids in 3 years. And so my home life, my personal life, a lot of what I do today, especially because of what I was as a CEO. So yes, today I'm not the CEO like some of your other guests, but I was a CEO for a long time. And a lot of what I help other CEOs and founders with is a lot of me having raised that family, and they're still not quite teenagers. They're, at least one of them is a preteen, although all of them try to act like teenagers, as we know today. But that home life for me, and taking care of also Ken, is a really important part of why I do what I do today, because I had all the data to show that I was an awesome boss, all the retention data. People loved staying with me, but I often was not that great boss to myself. And being a good boss to myself, and being very, present with the family, and having those 4 kids and doing all of what I do is all informed by that personal home life. So you see, someone might see me on LinkedIn. Oh, cool, this guy is LinkedIn famous. He's got his 30K followers. He's got his little business. It must be nice. But I, not that long ago, only had a couple thousand followers. It really wasn't about LinkedIn. But before I made that pivot. So that's like the part that isn't in my headline on my profile.
I appreciate that. I have 2 kids startups myself.
There you go.
And I know how the Monday goes. The kids have the Mondays. They're all not feeling well. And we're recording on a Monday, so it's probably an interesting start to the day for you.
Not only that, there was an unexpected thing with the kids today. There was a dentist appointment, and they were told right before this, because they came home early, Daddy's doing a podcast, so you're all going to need to go, out somewhere else and be quiet for a little bit. But this is the thing that we deal with, not only just in business, but in also the remote aspect, which I've been doing since 2005, which is another element that was unique to building an agency, especially. No one was doing remote agency work before all that time.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. Actually, I was recording a podcast a few weeks ago, and my wife was doing this workout app on Supernatural, and they kind of, and the video glitched out. Fortunately, I was able to fix it. But anyways, let's get into your LinkedIn journey. I'm curious, what motivated and inspired you to start investing in your LinkedIn presence? Maybe who did you see doing that made you want to try this out?
Sure. The first thing I'll just say, and I did a post about this recently for talking about LinkedIn, but I had a notification show up, an email saying, hey, congrats, you've been on LinkedIn since 2005. And that was in 2024. So that's 19 years ago. It said something like, you've been on LinkedIn for 19 years. And obviously all the way back then, it was a glorified place to store people that you knew. At best, there was no feed. There was not really the level of connection that we have today. Transparently, and it's not just about the wins that I've gotten off of LinkedIn, I had a desire to make LinkedIn more important in my business while I was running my software agency still as a CEO. And mainly how I had built that business was through, I've always been really good at building inbound engines, but through SEO and through a lot of inbound and my name and reputation being out there. During that time, Brad just pretty much failed, right? And even built a team in-house around, I had a social media person, I had a video person, I was doing video shoots. Ironically, a lot of the content that I was doing then became the content, as I reflect now, that I'm doing now, that was trying to I just didn't understand how to attract that audience off of LinkedIn. So when I left what I was doing before and became a partner in a global remote agency, and then we went through a strategic acquisition process, I had this desire to say, I think LinkedIn could be a really key part of this kind of business. And I believe that if I put in the reps and I apply myself in the way that I couldn't as a CEO, because I didn't know a Brad, transparently again, that kind of showed me some of the ropes there and make it work for my business, I believe this could be an important part of my business, if not be the thing that helps me build the business. We can get into some philosophies around marketing. I'm very careful to not overly invest into one channel, but I knew that it could be an important part of that. I didn't understand things at that point, and this is when I realized that my stuff wasn't working. I didn't really understand what a hook was necessarily, the structure, the format. Maybe if I go back and look at what I was doing, there was no hooks, there was no really good formatting, big chunky paragraphs, and I really wasn't being clear with the targeting of what would resonate with what I call the lighthouse client, but other people might say ICPs, right? And then spent a lot of time during that time before being solo, just getting Zippo results with spending probably 30K a month internally in terms of payroll. So I spent time, and there's probably not one group or one person that I learned from, but I did begin to follow certain people, understood what a hook was and why that was important, understood giving copy some breadth, keeping it more scannable, to then eventually spend time every single day, committing to do it every day for a while, which I don't necessarily recommend, because I had a runway myself of being able to figure this out. spent 6 months on a few different topics, had a bunch of viral posts, including maybe one of the most viral posts ever with 3.5 million views. But I had a bunch of posts like that really helped me get some visibility, but didn't necessarily make me money on the other side of it. And then said, I need to have visibility plus make money. And then began to apply more of what I did as the CEO, as the rainmaker, and combine those two things to eventually start to get some traction and start to attract people like yourself to say, we should talk more with this Ken guy.
So it sounded like you were tinkering with it before the remote solopreneur started.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Like I would say more than tinkering, but just really didn't have and I'll let you finish the question, but there weren't really playbooks. This is going into like maybe 2018, 2019. Not saying no one understood LinkedIn, but it wasn't really understood, especially for what I was trying to do at that stage. And then discount 2020 because people were just trying to survive then. But the playbook didn't entirely exist the way that it obviously exists 5 years later.
That is fair to say. When did things start to click for you and why?
Yeah, one of the things that I try to teach my clients who are, and it doesn't matter again, whether you're a consultant, whether you're SaaS, is to really understand what are you using, whatever the marketing channel is, what goal do you have? And I think my goal for some amount of time before things quote unquote clicked was just to understand how social worked as a marketing channel, but not necessarily to convert people into sales and leads. It really just was, how do I even get attention? How do I get attraction? How do I really get awareness? Now, fast forwarding to where we are today, I will look at social more as a distribution channel. But to answer your question, it was when I realized not only did I need to get the visibility, but I wanted to use this thing as a way to actually generate revenue. And so I had lots of viral posts with almost zero results in terms of any meaningful sales interactions, and then moved more into, let's find the blend of awareness with content that also would drive sales and drive conversion. That's when I moved from just talking about remote work, which is what I was doing at that time, to talking about remote as a key part of business and as a way to scale and grow without always having to have an office, without always having to grow with more payrolls, without spending a lot of money on ABM, account-based marketing tools, enterprise tools, and all those things. That's when I started to see that traction begin to take hold.
And I guess that was around 2022. Good timing in the middle of the pandemic.
So that was like really when this started to hit was more in, it was 2022, the beginning to mid 2022. So we had some years where we had the year where people just tried to survive. Then we came out of that a little bit, and I was still working in the agency. And then going into, by the middle of 2022, I started to find my voice and kind of find what people would say, here's why we would pay Ken money in that new business.
So it's good that you found content market fit, fair to say.
Yeah. And it wasn't, look, man, I have folks in all different trajectories. Sometimes people come to me and they're like pivoting out of their startup or their 9-to-5 corporate job. And then there's other folks that already have lots of followers, and the problems can be universally the same there. So I think part of why I have the advantage is I went through that exact experience myself. It's not like, oh, I can just tell you, oh yeah, do 3 more posts and you're going to start getting leads. It's, hey, you got to show up. You got to be able to have longevity. You got to commit to it. And for it to really become an inbound channel, not saying you can't get inbound off of a post, but to have consistent awareness, conversion, you got to show up for a while and be known for that thing. You're a marketer, so you understand that better than most.
For sure. It requires many touches and awareness. You have to have awareness before you have demand. Let's shift gears onto the really fun stuff for you. And we can talk a little bit about systems. What did you put into place to maintain and grow your presence around LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think part of the change and the shift there, and part of it too, was just I wanted to not be tapping into the nice payout that I had received in funding 4 kids and all the decisions that I made personally. It's not cheap to go through that. So I was tapping into all that during that time and saying, okay, I got to turn the corner here. And I think part of it was when I also went from thinking about it as, hey, I have some ideas of posts and maybe had like a notepad, to actually applying a lot of the systems and how I ran my own in-house marketing team. And my in-house marketing team wasn't just social. Social was one part of it. We had SEO. We built the case studies to get in front of our enterprise clients because they care about things like that. We did all those other things, but began to apply some of those same systems that I ran the team around, including building out sort of a content calendar, tracking when I had the idea, right, and putting it in. And so I built essentially, and I think I've demoed this off to some of my clients, but it's not something I've even ever open source necessarily, a very clear sort of content system in Notion that has a bunch of different views relative to the calendar, relative to idea capture. And I think the most important thing for people listening today is that you can't just show up in the morning and decide, here's what I'm going to post today, and think you're going to get any amount of success. I've had lots of people, it sounds obvious, but especially for people that are trying to go, I know part of this is not just about others that are LinkedIn famous, but it's the people that want to become LinkedIn famous. You have to apply purpose to this. And so the system starts with capturing the idea. I talked to a client and they're struggling with their offers aren't constructed in a way where they're getting people to actually buy. They get some leads, then they get into the sales conversation. They talk about what they do and no one closes. There has to be a system behind how do we take, in the same way, we have the idea. How do we take it, nurture that idea when we hear that problem from that client, get it into wherever you're tracking it, right? It doesn't have to be, I don't care if it's Notion, by the way. Sometimes people can get trapped in Notion. It could be a very big beast. But what is the place that you track it? How do you then take it and nurture it to more than an idea, where then it has the hook, then it has the body with the proper formatting, then it has the CTA. And what kind of content is it? Is it an awareness piece? Is it top of the funnel? Is it something that is middle of the funnel that's going to warm them up? Maybe it's a case study of sorts. I say case studies, but it could just be a testimonial for someone that you've worked with, or it could be a story about that. I love writing stories. Or is it something where you're saying, no, I specifically want to use this to generate interest and hopefully someone will come inbound and reply to this or reach out to me. Most people don't think about the content that way, right? So that system is thinking about those things and being able to capture that idea and then nurture it to an actual thing that comes out in the feed.
I love that. And just for everyone who's listening, is referring to Notion. The feature in Notion is called the Notion Database Calendar. I actually use that for a lot of my clients when I started the business, but it became a little unwieldy doing this for multiple clients where you couldn't really see everything that's going on. But for an individual, it's pretty powerful. I appreciate that idea capture system. Certainly more helpful to write from a place of abundance versus showing up at your desk at whatever it is, 8 a.m. What am I going to write today? Obviously, there's a real-time element where lightning strikes, you capture it. Do you plan any reflection during the week?
Yeah, I think part of this in terms of another system, and I shared this with people like yourself, and how we plan our best year. And I really try to plan my best year months before the current year. And we're recording this at the start of a year. But my planning typically starts in October, and then I plan out the year. But then specifically, I will come back in and at least once a month prune the content calendar. For me, it's not just a calendar view. There's a last edited view. There's a is it ready to be published view, right? There's a bunch of different views that also give me like, okay, this one, and there's even you're going bye-bye. Like I don't need the cognitive load. The ability to understand the signals relevant most recently is something that I really talk to people about. So it's not just saying like I could plan out a whole month and then not be responsive to what the market I'm seeing in the market and also seeing in the feed. By the way, people will share out swipe files all the time on LinkedIn and they'll reference me as an example, right? And it's okay, here's a bunch of different swipe files, but we really do need to have an ability to adapt. It's not, oh, I planned out 3 months. No, actually someone told me that I'm going to plan 90 days of calendar content on my calendar. I said, good luck with that because you're going to really fail hard. So there's absolutely an element of reflection and then trying to prioritize if I closed the deal or if I got more attention or I did whatever that goal was for the post, that's going to be weighted more and other things are going to get out of the queue.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the views, and that's, I would say, a pretty advanced function for most people. So anybody who's using a project management system, you can have these custom fields based on dates, having a separate view based on a custom field, and you can see what's fresh and ready to go, and sort and filter by different tags, including like the stage in the funnel, top of funnel, bottom of funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about it being a little geeky, I am a technologist after all, so I have an unfair advantage on all of that. I became a marketer and salesperson because I was an expert in technology and always following that trend. But I would also just say that this is not just there for the sake of being there. You have to look at different signals across the business, but especially on LinkedIn, it's not just, oh, this hook used to work or this post format used to work. There are even things right now where people have done a lot of these lead magnets that are trying to get someone to respond and reply, LinkedIn is actually starting to ban people who do some of those LinkedIn lead magnet viral posts because it's actually not something they want on the platform. There's a lot of people who are commenting for something and then never getting a response, and it doesn't drive the behaviors that they want necessarily.
Yes, I've seen a lot of that. The comment for the ebook or Notion page or guide, it's almost back to the days of inbound where you trying to solicit almost like an opt-in, getting people to connect and request you to grow your audience.
Yeah, and there's right ways to do it and there's wrong ways to do it. It's not like I've never done those things, but I think there's a lot of also this when people are in the feed and wanting to become LinkedIn famous, they'll see just the viral posts and think, okay, I need to do this as well. But some of those people, to your point earlier about can you have 30,000 plus people in your audience, a lot of people listening to this won't have that, and they still need LinkedIn to perform for their business. So there's different strategies, there's different systems to apply depending on your audience size, who you're selling to, and what your ultimate goal. My ultimate with the channel is my ultimate goal is more of a awareness distribution channel to then get people to want to hear from me more by coming on to my, what I call my briefing. It's my weekly newsletter to then maybe also want to watch a video or listen to a podcast like this one to then also possibly say, I'm going to come to one of Ken's workshops or maybe even apply for working with him. But that's not what most people have not designed their LinkedIn and their marketing funnels in a way like I just described.
I think that's a fair point. I'm in the club. That's the name of the community. I don't think I reference it by name up front, but you often tell people that LinkedIn is not a one-size-fits-all strategy. How do you recommend people think about the different phases, right? Because there's a lot of people who are listening to this podcast that might be way back in the beginning, where you were in 2020 or 2019, where you were tinkering. What do you see those different phases where you pull different levers?
Yeah, and I think part of it also will obviously, it'll be a little bit dependent on the way the company looks as well. So as a consultant or maybe even an agency, there may be less resources, but if you are someone who's a founder, obviously there's the ability to engage someone like yourself who helps with B2B thought leadership and helps with marketing positioning on LinkedIn. In terms of saying that there are certain resources in that case versus the solopreneur or the solo consultant. But let's just give a more generalized answer. I would say the way to think about this is relative to your audience size. And if you really are looking to more immediately generate business off of LinkedIn versus more of a branding, thought leadership awareness play. If you have sub 5,000 followers and connections, like I did, you don't have to post every day unless you are looking to go for more of a medium to long term. I'm going to become the person known for this thing. And that is going to be a 4 to 6 month process minimally to find what you described as the content, the market fit relative to who you're targeting on the platform. If you want to generate leads more immediately, you have to just have that optimized profile, right? What's in your banner, what's in your headline, even to some extent, what's in the about section, what's in the featured section, and then build what I call the ultimate outreach message that is not a pitch slap, but allows you to connect in a way that puts someone on your radar right away. And if that person's in market, they're going to want to say, tell me more. It doesn't have to be an or, Brad. It can be an and, depending on someone's resources. Again, I have a bunch of clients who are founders that also have someone that's maybe operating their profile, and they could have someone who's connecting proactively. Like some of the best guys in SaaS right now, Adam Robinson, these other guys are doing these models where I bet they're not the ones who are DMing everyone right out there. So it can be absolutely an and versus an or, but it depends on your resources, going back to my original point.
I think that's a fantastic point. I definitely talk to people who are trying to get started and they just are putting a lot of time and effort into content creation when their effort could be spent elsewhere, commenting DMs. I talked about the impact of LinkedIn on your business, and that story is unfolding as we speak. As you become more well-known in the LinkedIn sphere and by proxy, real life, have there been any unintended consequences of your investment into LinkedIn?
Yeah, there's positive and negatives. I think part of it, obviously, it's nice when someone says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And then they look you up like, "Oh my gosh, this guy like knows what he." You know, by the fact that I have 30,000 followers, I somehow know what I'm talking about. But before, I still did. So there's that social equity that's transferred because it also a platform where, again, if you're a person who's a fitness person, you're on Instagram and you have a bunch of followers, like you're more legitimate, right? Just by, okay, a bunch of people care what this person says. There's also the other side of it. And I just say this is the dark side of not just LinkedIn success, but of any success, because this happened in every single business where I've had success, where I legitimately today have lots of people who rip off my stuff, who have copied my posts, who have copied my concepts, including people that I've trained that basically decided they couldn't really do their business and they thought my business looked better and I'm doing well. So they just moved into that market. And I don't really fault those people. I don't stay up at night thinking, oh, I can't believe they did this. I just expected that to some extent. Maybe it happened faster than it did in the past, but also that shows that I've been an entrepreneur who's shortening my cycles of getting to success again, right? So I know there's probably lots of founders that are listening that this isn't their first time they've ever built something. They've built multiple ventures. Some of them have been more successful than others, just like me. That's just the nature of being an entrepreneur. And you have to remember that when that occurs, you can't just keep repeating the same playbook. And you shouldn't also be afraid, because the minute someone copies you is the minute that they're 6 months to a year behind you, because those are strategies that if you would have done it all right, you had in play during your planning and during that reflection time that you asked about. And you should already probably be looking at the things that you're going to start the cycle again, right? And say, okay, now I'm moving here. It's the old Gretzky quote of like, skate to where that puck is going to be. I think that's actually what LinkedIn is about as much as entrepreneurship, finding the thing that is popping off next.
I like that analogy. I think I often say it's almost like this game of tennis, and we all typically want to be playing with somebody who's better than you to stretch you and help you grow. And maybe just double clicking on that, you mentioned people ripping off at your strategies, and there's a saying that mimicry is the highest form of flattery. You're onto something. They want in on that. Is there anything about LinkedIn that you mentioned the ripoffs and whatnot? Anything else that kind of grinds your gears about it? If you had a magic wand, you can wave
Yeah, I think this is I appreciate that question. Relative to that, and I was actually talking to a client recently, and they were like, oh yeah, I was part of this other person's stuff, and I think you actually helped them, and I understand that sometimes people give you credit. I said they give me credit until it's not convenient to give me credit, right? But really what I would say is be very careful with who you listen to on social. Especially social has that immediate feedback loop of reactions and comments and reposts, and oh, this is obviously the truth because it has a lot of reactions. Part of what I've actually done is sell against a lot of the popular wisdom of what it looks like to grow businesses. There are a lot of even startups today that kind of have used my grow without big payrolls or grow without hiring stuff. And it really comes down to, has someone built a business like yours before and can help validate that what has influenced them sharing that is advice specific for you and where you want to go next. As an example, and some of them, again, are actually my clients. They could be someone that has hundreds of thousands of followers and they say, here's how to write a hook. But if you follow that way, and the hook, again, is just that first line, right? I think people probably by now will understand that. But if you write a hook a way to just go viral, you're only going to just go viral. And writing a hook as someone that has 50,000 plus followers, 100,000 plus followers, 200 plus thousand followers is very different than a founder or a SaaS who maybe has less than 10,000, and they really don't care about going viral. They care about getting more demos, or they care about their investors seeing something to validate that they were the right founder to invest into, or whatever the goals might be. So I think just being really careful about understanding, that's why I appreciate the way you're doing your intros, like more about that person. What have they done specifically, and have they done it in a way that reflects the kind of business you have and the way you want to grow that business and the way you want to scale it?
I like that. Rounding the corner towards the end of the interview, I think that's might be relevant to the next question. If somebody comes to you, maybe someone who's joined the club, or even somebody you meet at a cocktail party, brand new to LinkedIn, what do you tell them?
It's funny because I've done that unofficially. I try to give back too. There's millions of people between what I did previously and what I've done today that have read my book. I wrote a book back in the day, that have read my blog posts. I used to have the top 5 results for everything in my industry, and lots of people have read those things. So over time, there's been a lot of people that have read my stuff that'll never pay me a dime. And that's why I actually like to describe myself as a mentor. There's some people that pay me for that mentorship, and there's others that don't. But to answer your question, I have had times where I sat down with, let's say, a college student and said, hey, here, they actually were like, oh, I've seen you on LinkedIn, and maybe they told a bunch of people in my neighborhood about what I do on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, great. Now my neighbors know all the details, right? But they'll say, hey, I want to do this thing. And I talk about it to them relative to actually what we talked about is like, hey, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? Some of them were trying to get job interviews at places that were hard to get job interviews. And I say, okay, here's how we would use LinkedIn. Other times people say, hey, I'm writing content and I'm getting some traction, but I'm not getting leads. And other times it'd be like, I have a lot of followers. And again, you said like getting started, but I'm just progressing it.
Yep.
We're always looking at it relative to where you are in the process and what the goals are. But a lot of the stuff is, I fundamentally believe this to really answer your question the way you wanted me to. Copywriting, independent if you ever write copy, is going to help you across the board in your business because it actually helps you understand psychology. It understands the way that you connect with people, whether you write copy on a homepage, in an email, a hook, really goes across all those things. So I would take the time to invest into that. Obviously, then there's the platform specifics like we've been talking about. But if you do that, you can apply copywriting to social, email, whatever the channel is. And I think it's going to pay dividends back in the business.
I love that. I feel like coming from the world of marketing, sometimes take that for granted. That's some great advice. Who do you think is crushing it on LinkedIn, or who are you following and learning from on LinkedIn to up your game?
There's two ways that I think about this. The first is just the stuff that shows up in my feed that maybe LinkedIn has done a good job of promoting. I think like the serendipity of that is actually maybe more important. The algorithm is always changing. What's popular now, as of last month, as of 3 months ago, is changing. And you will find in the feed the way to look at that and say, how do I do my version of that? So that's one way to answer it. The other way to answer it, and again, not trying to make it self-serving, but these are some of the people that I'm looking at are some of the people that are in my orbit. Some of them are my clients. And I would say a couple of them, and again, are pretty much all people that I've worked with in some form or capacity, to say the disclosure element of that. But I really like the way Alex Sheridan, he previously worked with him. He's got an agency, and his spin right now is fire your marketing agency. What his philosophy is right now, and I won't take credit for this, I worked with him on a lot of things, is be the content. All day long, you're actually producing content. This meeting, well, we're saying meeting, but you and I are chatting, like, is content. But also another meeting that you had with a client, maybe even behind closed doors, could be content. Let's say you had the camera rolling and you're talking to the client, you didn't reveal their proprietary information, but that is content, right? So there's actually lots of content that can come out regularly. So he's doing an awesome job of that. Also a really big fan of Stacey Havener. She runs a boutique investment firm and she does a really good job of storytelling. Again, someone that I've worked with. She does a great job of storytelling, mixing in like, here's the new playbook, but also showcasing how she lives it out. And she also does a great job of mixing up the content types, which I think a lot of people are afraid to do. She's now working with actually some of my clients. I'm going to mention maybe one more of them. But she's done walk and talks, right? She's down at the beach and she's walking and talking. It's not overly scripted. She does images. She does text posts. So she does a great job of this as well. And then one more, Danny Del Vecchio is another person that I've worked with over the years, but he does a great job with video. And we worked on some positioning for him to stand out more relative to video, but he's doing lots of it's not just one type of video. People think, oh, I just do video. He has lots of different kinds of videos and he's showing clients depending on what their goals look like. Just like I talked about different kinds of text posts, he's actually saying, here's the kind of video that you want to do if you want to have more awareness. Here's the kind of video that you do. And he wouldn't even necessarily serve your audience, but I think they could be inspired, right? He's working more with like solo founders and so forth, but showing them the different kinds of video types. So those are a few folks, but I always say, go to those people and then look at the node connections there, right? Who are they also engaging with? And you're going to find in a very short period of time, the 20 people that you should be engaging with or learning from. And that should be the way that you really build your own approach and your own go-to-market strategy.
I like that mindset. And I think probably who's interesting to learn from probably is different for everybody. And I do think Coach Danny D, he's got some awesome content on videos. Is there anything going on at the Remote Solopreneur that you'd like to share with the audience?
My thing is I'm all about foundations over fads. And sometimes there can be fads in the feed, to the point I was making earlier. And it's not to say that you just take that thing and you plug it into your business. But I would just say that for people who heard anything today about systems or anything that kind of caught their attention today, I just have a very simple blueprint around this. So you could just go over to trs.club/blueprint. Very simple URL to remember, especially if you're listening to this on a run or whatever, trs.club/blueprint. And it gives you my way and my vision of how you can grow without hiring using systems. and grow. It doesn't matter if you grow a 6-figure, a 7-figure, whatever your goal is. There's definitely nuggets in there for people. So I would say not that there's an immediate thing happening, but more build the foundations and then allow whatever sort of the timely things are to be built around that.
Thank you very much for sharing that with everybody. There is a YouTube version of this, and we'll also link that in the description, the show notes. There's a Substack, so we'll make sure that makes its rounds. Obviously, everybody go on LinkedIn, follow Ken if you haven't heard about him before. Is there anywhere else where people can find and learn from you?
There's, I do keep my X running. It was ironic that I was on Twitter when no one else was, and that grew fast. But then I've obviously shifted a little bit more over to LinkedIn. And I actually do have a YouTube channel, but generally speaking, it's fine for people to find me on LinkedIn. And if they go through the system and see how I'm using it, they can discover the YouTube channel as well, Brad. So thanks so much again for having me out here today, man. It was a lot of fun.
Also, don't forget about Ken's newsletter, The Blueprints. Ken, thank you so much for being generous with your time and insights. And until next time, let's stay connected. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Brad and Spectimer on LinkedIn for hot takes and tactical executive branding advice. For the readers in the audience, subscribe to LinkedIn Famous on Substack. And if you really love this episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting platform of your choice. Until next time, stay bold, authentic, and keep on creating.